They mocked him. An old man in a frayed coat sweeping the sidewalk outside a military base like he didn't belong. Recruits threw coffee at his feet. MPs ordered him to leave. No one knew his name. No one cared. Until a black SUV rolled onto base, and a 4-star general stepped out, took one look at the old man, and whispered, "Sir." What happened next silenced the entire base. Because the man they humiliated wasn't a drifter. He was a ghost from the past. A commander presumed dead for over 40 years. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will change how you see quiet heroes forever. Subscribe for more true stories that deserve to be remembered. The fog hung low over the chain-link perimeter of Camp Granger, softening the hard lines of the barracks and guard towers in the gray light of dawn. It was the kind of still morning that made the world feel paused, like a held breath before the day began. And just outside the east gate, where the cracked sidewalk met the gravel lot, an old man moved slowly with a wooden broom in hand. His jacket was threadbare, sleeves fraying at the cuffs, boots scuffed flat at the toes. A faded cap rested low on his brow, the bill casting shadow over deep-set eyes. He swept in long, practiced strokes, left to right, curb to curb, pausing only when a gust of wind scattered the leaves he'd just gathered. Then he'd start again without complaint. From behind the fence, a cluster of recruits leaned against the rail, steaming coffee in hand, still shaking off sleep. One of them, a broad-shouldered private barely out of high school, watched the old man with a sneer curled at the corner of his mouth. "Hey!" he shouted, loud enough to cut through the fog. "You don't belong here, old man. Move along." The others chuckled. Another chimed in, mimicking a drill sergeant's bark. "Let's go, civvy. Area's for soldiers, not strays." The private smirked, picked up his coffee cup, still half full, and launched it over the fence. It spun once in the air before landing with a splatter at the man's feet, brown liquid spraying across the concrete. The old man didn't flinch. He looked down slowly, studied the spill, and with a quiet breath, nudged it toward the gutter with his broom. Then, gripping the handle with both hands, he adjusted his stance and resumed his sweeping. Not a glance toward the fence. Not a word. Behind the wire, the laughter faded. One of the younger recruits shifted uncomfortably, eyes fixed on the slow, deliberate rhythm of the man's movements. There was something strange about the way he swept. Not casual, not aimless. It was the way someone trained long ago might clear a landing zone or mark a safe path. But no one said anything more. They watched as the old man continued his quiet work, vanishing bit by bit into the fog, like a memory trying not to be forgotten. At precisely 0600, just as the eastern sky began to pale and the barracks lights flickered off one by one, the man appeared. Always from the same side street, always with the same steady gait. Slight limp, shoulders hunched against the wind, broom in hand like a walking stick. His coat was the same each day, olive green with worn elbows and a small tear near the left pocket. Some days he wore gloves, fingerless, frayed at the seams. Other days, bare hands, calloused and cracked, wrapped around the splintered handle of his broom. He never spoke. Not to the guards, not to the soldiers jogging past, not to the mail clerks or the delivery trucks or the morning shift headed toward the mess. He just swept. From the edge of the parking lot to the chain-link fence, across the sidewalk and over to the drainage grate. Leaves, cigarette butts, bits of gravel kicked loose from convoy tires. He cleared it all with the same quiet discipline, one pass at a time. They started calling him Ghost. It began as a joke among the night watch. One morning, he just appeared. No one had seen him arrive. No one had spoken to him. But there he was, sweeping the same path like he belonged to it. Probably some old-timer with nowhere else to go, someone said. Probably cracked, another offered. Harmless, though. After a while, even the MPs stopped questioning his presence. He wasn't breaking any rules, wasn't crossing any lines, just a quiet old man outside the gate, sweeping. They stopped noticing the way he paused when the flag rose, or how his head turned, just slightly, when an officer walked by, or the way he stood, not like a man at rest but wanted attention, subtly, instinctively. The young soldiers barely glanced at him. Some joked that he thought he was part of the base, like a statue that wandered off the pedestal. Others dismissed him as background noise, like the hum of the generators or the buzz of the overhead lights. But a few, very few, watched him longer than a second and felt something strange twist in their chest. Because there was something about the way he moved. Not slow, not aimless. Precise, familiar, like someone still following orders no one had given in years. The morning was colder than most. Frost clung to the edges of the base signs, and the flag above the gate flapped stiffly in the brittle wind. Private First Class Neil Carter pulled his collar higher as he walked across the yard, nursing a paper cup of black coffee that steamed against his glove. He wasn't in a rush like the others. Neil was never in a rush. He noticed things, small things, the way the base dog limped a little more on rainy days. The extra second Sergeant Rios paused at the memorial wall. And the old man, always the old man. He was already there, like always, broom in hand, moving quietly through the fog. Same coat, same boots, same silent determination. Neil had passed him every morning for 6 weeks, watching from a distance. Not once had he seen the man ask for anything. No food, no warmth, no acknowledgement. Just that rhythmic sweeping, eyes lowered, world tuned out. That morning, Neil took a different route. He stopped halfway to the gate and walked toward the man instead. No fanfare, just a slow, deliberate approach. When he got close, he held out the extra coffee he'd grabbed from the mess. "Cold one today," Neil said softly. The old man paused, looked at the cup, looked at Neil, then gave a faint nod. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. Like a silent agreement had just been made. He took the cup without a word and went back to sweeping. That was when Neil saw it. A corner of paper poking out from the inside pocket of the man's coat, fluttering slightly in the wind. At first, Neil thought it was a receipt or an old map, but as the man leaned forward, the light caught it just right, and Neil saw the image. A photograph, worn and folded a dozen times over. 8 men in combat gear standing in front of what looked like a downed helicopter. Dust and smoke hung behind them. Most were covered in grime and sweat, but one stood taller, straighter, at the center, in command. Neil's breath caught. It was him. The old man, decades younger, face harder, eyes sharper, was unmistakably the one at the front of the group. A leader, a soldier. Neil didn't say anything. Not then. He just nodded, quietly, and stepped back as the man resumed his sweeping. The photograph slipped back into shadow. But Neil had seen it, and he would not forget. The new base commander arrived with the kind of energy that made everyone stand a little straighter. Colonel Ryland Voss, 39, West Point polished, sharp jaw, sharper orders. Efficiency was his language. Protocol his gospel. Within 48 hours of assuming command, he'd restructured shift rotations, tripled patrol drills, and posted fresh signage at every gate. No unauthorized civilians loitering near perimeter. To most, it was just a clarification. To the old man with the broom, it meant something else entirely. At 0600, just as he had for years, the old man appeared at the edge of the eastern sidewalk, shoulders hunched slightly against the wind, his broom trailing lightly behind him like an extension of his arm. The fog hadn't yet burned off, and the street lamps still flickered with the last whispers of night. But this morning, 2 MPs were already waiting for him. One was Sergeant Fulton, older, tired eyes, the kind who understood that not everything needed correcting. The other, Corporal Gentry, was new to base, young, all shoulders and certainty. "Sir," Fulton said evenly, stepping forward, "we're going to need you to step away from the gate. Orders from command." The old man stopped sweeping, looked at the yellow line drawn near the edge of the fence, then back at Fulton. "You're not in trouble," Fulton added gently. "Just not allowed to be here anymore." Gentry, less patient, stepped in. "You heard him. Time to go, old man." The old man didn't argue. He leaned his broom against the fence, bent slowly at the knees, and began to gather his belongings: a worn canvas satchel, a folded wool jacket, a pair of gloves with the fingertips torn open. As he lifted the satchel, the zipper caught on a cracked edge of the bench behind him. Something slipped free, small, metal, weathered with age, and clattered onto the pavement. The broom, too, was knocked from its resting place and landed harshly beside it. Gentry, irritated, kicked it farther. "Shouldn't be here anyway," he muttered. But Fulton had already stepped closer. On the ground lay a rusted service medal, edges tarnished, ribbon threadbare. Next to it, a scorched fabric patch, barely clinging to shape. The words were faint, nearly gone, but legible. Recon Unit 17, Granite Spear. Fulton's face changed. The wind seemed to hush. Even Gentry fell still. The old man knelt again, slower this time. He gathered the items carefully, brushing dirt from the patch with a tenderness that didn't match his ragged hands. He said nothing, just stood, gripping the broom again as if it held him upright. No one spoke as he turned and walked away, leaving behind nothing but a cleared sidewalk, and questions no one yet dared ask. Neil Carter stood behind the glass of the security outpost, coffee forgotten in his hand, eyes fixed on the patch that had fallen seconds ago. The old man was already walking away, broom tucked under one arm, satchel slung over his shoulder like he was carrying nothing heavier than time. But Neil's gaze stayed locked on that patch. Not the color, not the shape. The name, Granite Spear. It rang like a bell inside his memory, something from a mandatory debriefing during advanced infantry orientation. Most of the room had barely listened. It was old history, a mission from 1972 buried under layers of classification and dust. But Neil had listened, always had. Something about the tone the instructor used. Quiet, measured, like telling ghost stories to men too young to believe in them. Special Recon Unit 17, Middle East Theater. Mission compromised. Contact lost. Presumed KIA. No bodies recovered, no press, just a single sentence at the end of the file. Commanding Officer, Colonel Everett Shaw. Status missing in action. Neil blinked hard, heart beginning to thud louder than seemed necessary for just a memory. He left the outpost and crossed toward where the man had stood. The broom had left streaks in the dew on the sidewalk, like lines on a map pointing nowhere. He knelt where the metal had hit the concrete and looked at the faint indentation it had left. Still there, still real. Later, in the barracks, he pulled out the old field training manual. Page 47. Special Operations History. There it was. Granite Spear. He read it again, slower this time, until he reached the sentence he hadn't remembered. Last radio contact recorded the team under fire. Extraction failed. CO reported staying behind to cover retreat. Final transmission, get them out. Neil ran a finger along the edge of the page. A name, faintly penciled in the margin from someone else's notes years ago. Shaw was a ghost. He exhaled through his nose, mind racing. If the old man was who Neil now believed he might be, then he wasn't just a quiet drifter sweeping concrete. He was a commander who'd been swallowed by silence and left there to vanish. But something in him hadn't let go. And now, neither could Neil. By mid-afternoon, something unspoken moved through Camp Granger like static before a storm. Conversations hushed mid-sentence. Doors that usually stayed closed cracked open just an inch. In the comms office, two sergeants leaned over a decades-old service log, scanning it like it might suddenly explain the chill in the air. The word granite spear had been mentioned in a security report that morning, offhand, nearly dismissed, until someone made a call. Then another, then the phones didn't stop ringing. No one said anything out loud. But by 1500 hours, the gate staff stood straighter. Officers who rarely looked out their windows were quietly watching the front lot. At 1537, a black SUV with government plates rolled through the side entrance. No convoy, no flags, no escort. Just the slow, deliberate crawl of something that did not need to announce itself. It stopped near the administration building. The driver stepped out quickly and rounded to the back door, opening it without flourish. The man who emerged moved like someone whose body still remembered wars it no longer wanted to carry. His uniform was crisp, dark green, adorned with rows of medals that shimmered in the sunlight like quiet scars. His posture was ramrod straight, but his right leg dragged slightly with each step. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulder. General Jonathan Ellison. His aide began to speak. Something clipped and rehearsed, but the general raised one hand. A simple, silent gesture. Enough. His eyes swept the courtyard, then stopped. Across the yard, by the east gate, a lone figure stood by the fence, broom in hand, coat ruffling slightly in the breeze. Ellison didn't move right away. His lips parted, but no words came out. He just stared, like he was looking at a ghost. A memory. A man buried decades ago in the jungle and paperwork, now standing quietly on a military sidewalk like he'd never left. "Dear God," Ellison murmured under his breath. He straightened his cap, squared his shoulders, and began to walk, each step heavy with years that hadn't passed until now. The broom moved in quiet, practiced arcs, back and forth, back and forth. The old man didn't notice the hum of shifting boots behind him, or the soft crackle of radios gone silent. He didn't notice the line of officers frozen near the admin building or the wide-eyed recruits peering from behind pillars. He just swept. Same rhythm, same path, until the breeze changed. Footsteps echoed across the concrete. Measured, deliberate, heavier than most. Not the rushed shuffle of a late corporal or the confident pace of a senior sergeant. These were steps born of weight, of memory, of rank. The crowd parted instinctively. Some didn't know who he was, only that he wore stars. Others knew too well. But all of them moved aside as the general crossed the square. The old man, broom in hand, hunched forward, was brushing a line of pebbles into the gutter when the footsteps stopped just behind him. No fanfare, no commands. Just a quiet presence pressing in like the final note of a long-forgotten song. The general removed his cap slowly, fingers tight around the brim. His eyes did not blink. "Sir?" he said, barely above a whisper, voice raw. "Is it really you?" The broom paused mid-sweep. The old man didn't turn at first. He stood still, listening as if the words had to catch up with time. Then, slowly, his head lifted. His eyes met the general's, and everything stopped. Traffic at the gate slowed to a crawl. Conversations died on half-spoken words. Somewhere, a radio squawked for attention and was ignored. Even the flag overhead seemed to falter in its movement. The general's voice cracked, lower now, more personal. Everett Shaw. It wasn't a question anymore. The old man said nothing, but his hand gripped the broom tighter and a flicker passed through his eyes, like a flame long buried under ash. Recognition. Memory. Pain. And something else. He gave the faintest nod, slow and deliberate. And for the first time in decades, Colonel Everett Shaw stood not as a shadow on the sidewalk, but as a man remembered. The general's shoulders dropped, as if some unbearable weight had just been confirmed, and around them soldiers stood frozen, not by command but by reverence, unsure if they were witnessing a reunion or the resurrection of something sacred. They sat on a weathered bench near the eastern gate, where the base sidewalk met the outer road. The same bench where Shaw folded his jacket each morning before he swept. Now, for the first time, he wasn't alone on it. No one approached. No press, no podium. Just two men, side by side, one in full dress uniform, medals catching the sunlight like shards of history. The other in a faded coat, threadbare at the cuffs, hands resting in his lap like they had nothing left to grip but memory. They spoke quietly, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be overheard. General Ellison didn't interrupt. He just listened as Shaw began, his voice dry, low, like reading from a page that had been folded and unfolded too many times. It was 72, he said, staring ahead. Granite Spear. Supposed to be a precision operation. Get in, extract, get out before sunrise. Intel said light resistance. We trusted it. He paused. It was wrong. Shaw's hands flexed, unconsciously mimicking the feel of a rifle, or maybe a radio that had gone dead. We landed in the dark, middle of nowhere. They were waiting. Not light resistance, entire compound armed, ambush. Ellison nodded once, quietly. We fought our way to the prisoners, Shaw continued. 6 of them. One couldn't walk. Carried him on my back. We reached the evac point, called for dust-off. Chopper never came. His voice thinned. They were pinned. I told the others to run. I stayed behind, drew their fire. Ellison didn't breathe. I was hit. Twice. Crawled into a ditch. Thought I'd die there, honestly. But they found me, not ours, theirs. Captured. I destroyed my ID tags during the op, like we were trained. No name, no papers. Just me. Another long pause. 2 years in a hole. They broke bones. Broke my face. When they finally traded me back in a prisoner exchange, I could barely speak English straight. Couldn't remember half my unit's names. He looked down at his hands. They didn't believe I was who I said I was. Thought I was confused, delusional, no match in the system, no record, no rank, just a man with scars and silence. Ellison swallowed hard. So I stopped trying to prove it, Shaw said. Didn't want pity. Didn't want to explain it all again. I just came here. He looked toward the gate, the base he'd guarded in silence for years. Figured if I couldn't serve the way I used to, I'd serve the only way they'd let me, quietly, without needing anyone to salute. They gathered slowly at first. A few soldiers drifting in from morning drills. A couple of officers who'd heard whispers through the radio chatter. Then more. Mess hall staff, mechanics wiping grease from their hands, medics pausing mid-shift, all drawn to the eastern gate by something they couldn't quite name. Colonel Everett Shaw stood where he always did, just beyond the yellow line, his broom resting against the bench like an afterthought. But this time, he wasn't invisible. General Ellison stepped forward, his cap tucked beneath one arm, his voice low but firm enough to cut through the wind. He didn't need a microphone. He didn't raise his voice. He simply spoke like a man stating fact, not for applause, but for correction. "This man," Ellison said, gesturing beside him, "is not a drifter. He's not a vagrant or a liability. He is Colonel Everett Shaw, United States Army, Special Recon Unit 17, presumed KIA 1972, Operation Granite Spear." A hush fell across the yard. Some eyes went wide. Others narrowed, trying to place the name, the mission, the weight behind it all. Most of them weren't born when Granite Spear had unraveled in a firestorm half a world away, but they recognized something now, something unspoken. The silence itself began to shift. Ellison continued, quieter this time. He never came home because no one believed he had survived, but he did, and he came here every morning and kept watch. Alone. For all of us. No orders were given, no signal passed, but slowly, soldiers began to rise. From the bench, from the stairs, from behind the gates. They stood, boots square on the concrete, shoulders squared, chins lifted. One by one, salutes rose, not just from recruits, but from officers, instructors, guards, cooks. Hands lifted in quiet unity, facing the man they had ignored for years. Shaw didn't move at first. Then his hand came up, deliberate, steady despite the age in his bones. He returned the salute, not out of habit, but out of grace. And for the first time since his name was lost to a forgotten report, Everett Shaw wasn't just seen. He was remembered. They offered him a house, a quiet one on the edge of the base with a view of the sunrise and walls that didn't leak cold through the cracks. He declined. They offered interviews, too. News anchors, documentary producers, historians who wanted to place his story in books and film reels. He declined those as well. He asked for only one thing. To raise the flag each morning, he said simply. Just that. And the base agreed. Without ceremony, without resistance. It was never written into orders, but every soldier knew. The eastern gate opened at 0558. Not for a convoy, not for a commander, for Everett Shaw. He arrived as he always had. Same coat, same broom, but now a folded flag under his arm. The honor guard began meeting him there. At first unsure, then reverent. The bugler came by the third day. Children from base housing started to gather, some still in pajamas, drawn by the quiet grace of it all. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. He unfolded the flag with care, hands steady even when the wind bit through his sleeves. Each motion had weight. The kind of weight you only learn from carrying more than your share. And when the anthem played, he stood at attention. Same posture he had the day Ellison whispered his name back into the world. The cadets came next, from Silver Ridge, 2 towns over, then from farther. Some came to salute, some came to sit in silence, some came to ask him questions. He answered them all, not with grandeur, but with honesty. Discipline matters most when no one's looking. Service doesn't end. Silence isn't the same as absence. When the Department of Defense opened a new ethics hall later that year, they named it after him, the Shaw Center for Duty and Honor. But Everett didn't attend the ribbon cutting. He was sweeping near the gate that morning. He passed quietly 5 years later, alone in his sleep, hand resting on the broom like it had never left his grasp. But every morning at Camp Granger, at exactly 0600, a young soldier now stands by the flagpole. Sometimes a cadet, sometimes a corporal, always someone who knew the story. They unfold the flag, raise it with care, then sweep the sidewalk in silence, just like Shaw did. Because some legacies don't live in statues or speeches. They live in small rituals, quietly kept.